So let's jump into today's talk. So, obviously we've invited a longtime member, Brent Tworetzky, former Chief Product Officer at InVision, to come and join us today and give a talk and really kick off a conversation on best and worst practices on remote, work from home workforce. So his last company, he's in transition right now. He's actually just accepted a new role as COO at Parsley Health, which is a functional health-based primary care startup. He's been leading product design and engineering orgs for the last 7 years. At InVision, where he was CPO, he had a team of about 300 product design and engineering folks within their broader 900-person company. And he was really responsible for making the machine work at scale. And they tried and learned many things about how to operate effectively in a fully remote environment, what to do and also what not to do. And so what we're going to do is Brent has kindly put together some thoughts on lessons learned, and he'll share that 15-20 minutes, Brent, I think, something like that, right? And then we'll go to Q&A. Now, some of you have already submitted questions, and I've already got the first 3 people lined up that I'm going to call in and bring into the conversation live to ask your questions. But I want others of you, as you hear Brent talking or as you have questions right away, put it in the Q&A section of the Zoom interface. And if that's at all a problem, just put it in the chat interface. We'll be checking both. All right. So without further ado, Brent, thank you so much for doing this today. I know these are crazy times for all of us. I really appreciate you taking the time to help us think about this important question.
Thanks for asking me to help. I love how this exec community gets together to support each other. I'm also joined today by the Chief People Officer of InVision, Mark Fryan, who will pop in. He's here for the first half hour, and he'll augment things that I'm sharing as it makes sense.
Yeah, and let me say, I'm sorry, to Mark. Mark, if you ever want to jump in and add to what Brent's saying, just put it on the Q&A or send me a chat, and I'll bring you in live. Okay, thanks for being here. Okay.
I'm going to be walking through a deck. That's something that I'll be able to share out with you afterwards. I'm going to share my screen right now. As Phil shared, I've spent the last 2 years trying to figure out how to run a large group of remote people effectively, and it's been tricky because as we grew from 250 to 500 to almost 1,000 as a fully distributed company, there weren't other models to copy. There are now roughly 4 companies that are fully 100% distributed with no HQ, the way we are. Ourselves, HashiCorp, Atlassian, Automatic, and GitLab. And talking with executives from those companies, we've all identified similar problems and come at it with different solutions that have bubbled up organically. So everything I'm going to share with you is based on things that I've learned over the last couple of years. It's not the right answer. It's not the only answer. It's what's ended up working well for us. And some of the things will raise problems more than have the best solutions. But as we're getting together to figure out how to support our people as best as possible, it's going to push our thinking forward. Because we worked on this literally over the last couple of days, the production value is pretty crap, and I apologize for that, mostly to be able to get us to have some useful things. So just a quick background of my experience so you understand my context. Like many of you, I've worked in several companies that have a core home office with remote individuals, remote engineers, et cetera, such as Udacity and ClassPass, and figured out, hey, how do I make these people successful, and adapted my behavior that way. Also had several companies with a home office and then remote engineering offices in different time zones, India, China, Israel, or multiple locations in the US, and then figured out how to make those things successful when we have a conference room here and a conference room there. And like many of you have figured out how to locally optimize making that work, knowing that it's not great. And then lastly at InVision, when we grew it so quickly, we had to figure out all these new rules. So things that are kind of different in a remote setup that are obvious, but are the root causes of our challenges. One is you're not in an office, you are alone, often at home. Your work and social schedule is intentional. every hour of the day is more or less scheduled in. And your data inputs go from being humans around you talking to you and having water coolers and seeing body language to being a text-driven data inputs about what to do culturally, directionally, strategically, with a lot less context and a lot more noise to signal. And so all of that makes it harder. These are the root conditions that then cause all the problems we're going to talk about. So as a remote individual contributor, this can be okay, especially as an individual. You can get more flow time, but generally folks say, hey, we're treated as a second-class citizen sometimes. Yeah. As you go from being a remote manager, it's pretty tough to lead and manage when all your people are in different places. It's harder to know what they're doing. It's harder to shape them and steer them in casual ways. And gosh, as we found at InVision, as a remote executive team, it's really, really hard to run the company well. Your operations need to be intentional to counteract the challenges of being fully distributed. So I'll start with the benefits so that we can at least acknowledge there's goodness in all of this, and we can take advantage of that goodness. On the direction setting side of things, being in a distributed company forces you to communicate more, and that can often form a more explicit strategy, mission, and goals. And like that's actually a benefit of rigor that naturally happens in moving in this direction. On the people side of your operations, you can hire from anywhere. That's great. It's a huge plus. And I remember when I got to InVision, I thought, well, gosh, most people are going to feel weird about working in a remote environment. I found that actually most people are open to it. Some people prefer it, people who need more flexible life schedule. And what you'll find as you've gone from in-person to remote, some people will not want to go back. They actually prefer it, especially if they're creative individual contributors. And then on the people love the better work-life flexibility. Folks who have had to sort of do things like take kids to school or need flexibility of just dealing with home life environment actually really value that. And then on the process side of things, it forces you to have a more intentional use of time. And so you'll find that you waste less time. Flow time is great. Like you can actually get your creatives to have a 4-hour block of uninterrupted time without people going back and forth. They turn off their Slack notifications. It's a real benefit to them. And you'll probably find in this remote transition that your teams are making that those folks actually enjoy this the most. No conference rooms, just saying that's a great benefit. And then limited commuting is actually a great gift. And people will get back 30, 60, 120 or more minutes of their day by not having to commute. And many of the folks take that and use it with their family and are really grateful. And so this is just keeping morale high in this transition is get people to think about all these benefits. But now in these sections of direction, people, and process, I wanted to share with you some of the challenges we faced and things that we did about it. And the challenges I found particularly to be on the people and the process side. So first, starting with—
And Brent, if I can just jump in a second, of course, you're full-time remote at InVision as well as some of the other companies you mentioned. And I think it's really valuable and helpful to think of this, to see what you've learned. And I know you're going to get to it now, but of course, we understand everyone is doing this now because of the pandemic.
Yes.
And, but there are these benefits. So I just wanted to,
yes, and I'm not going to assume you're going to live this way forever, but what's probably going to happen, at least in New York and California, is that we're going to have to live this way for 2 months. Is current best thinking from as far as I can tell. It's not a 1 week thing. It's like a couple month thing, and that's a huge impact to your certainly quarterly OKRs are now going to depend on quarterly performing this way.
Yeah. Okay. So keep going. Sorry. Thanks.
So just to start with on direction, what is the challenge in a remote environment? I find that when you are out of alignment of your mission, your strategy, your goals, your business logic, being in person, you can sort of get people going in the same direction through like social herding and people hearing the same thing at all hands and sort of reinforcing and nudging each other in the right direction. That doesn't happen in a distributed environment because of the signal to noise problem, because of the sort of lack of just being around each other, seeing how people react at all hands, things like that. And so It just means you have to be more rigorous at getting your pieces in shape. If your people don't know what the strategy is, if they don't know how the strategy and the mission tie, if they don't know how you make money, folks are going to focus on the goals that they see in front of them and just sort of move in that direction. And what will often happen is that you will have locally optimized performance by department, but that the machine of the company starts to like veer apart from each other and be less effective. And it's harder to see that. When you're in person and things are misaligned, you can start to pick that up much more. We just found it just easier to steer away from each other. So you got to do more work. As leaders, you have to bring clarity to your folks. When you do quarterly planning, for example, or however you do your planning, you'll likely have a quarterly planning cycle happen in this remote environment. You have to be intentional about getting people to work together cross-functionally. In their day-to-day life, they're going to work with their own functions a lot more. And what starts to happen is that like people will know their departments better, and know other departments and just have exposure to them much less. And so goals start to actually feel more siloed as opposed to collaborative. You have to force this to happen because just the natural gravity will pull them departments away from each other. And then of course, communicate. There's so much noise that happens in this environment that you have to just provide people clarity at all costs. Lots of ways of doing this that I've seen be great. Have literally mail people things to put on their walls, like this is the most important thing going on. Print them out cards, like keep on their desk. But whatever it takes, make sure that your people are as supported as possible in knowing where to go. This is the part, frankly, that is the least hard of the three areas, but still critical. Now let's talk about people. You've changed how people live their lives. That's tricky. And so what does it mean for them? First, let's talk about hiring. Hiring is a totally different ballgame in a distributed world. You're used to people typically, maybe having a phone call, coming into an office, being able to see what people are like in formal and informal settings. Maybe you go out for lunch to have like a closed session. It is so much harder in a distributed environment. What I found is that the funnel of people to hire is much bigger. If you're going to hire into a remote environment, if you're still going to hire into your local geography, that doesn't matter. But evaluating them becomes a lot harder because your signals are very different. You don't have the soft signals, and onboarding them is much harder. In fact, Phil, I'd like to invite Mark to hop in here to give any additional thoughts, since he was the owner of this for our company. But I found a lot higher failure rate of hiring and setting people up for success in a distributed environment.
Let me bring Mark in. Hey, Mark, if you unmute on your side, I think you can join us.
If you unmute and share your screen.
Yeah, and share your screen, right?
I'm here, but I don't have a invite to share my screen, unfortunately.
Let me see if I can.
But hey,
Yeah, okay, that's, ooh, what just happened?
Oh, let's try it again.
Okay. Mark,
there I am.
There you are.
Hey, nice to be seen. Nice. I was already seeing you up. Happy to be here.
So do you have anything you want to add on this?
I do.
I mean, my guess is companies probably will be hiring less in the next 2 months during this crisis, but they may still be in the middle of important hirings now, right? And things like that.
Absolutely.
And you'll be onboarding people right now that you already
certainly
hired.
onboarding people that you've already hired, yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, while at InVision, my team hired almost like well over 800 people over the course of a few years, and all of which were hired and ultimately onboarded remote. So it can be done. What I would say in terms of the hiring process is it actually forces you just to have much better diligence on how you hire. And by that, I mean, there isn't anything specifically that you're going to do dramatically differently interviewing over Zoom, but it does demand that you follow really good interviewing technique. So I mean, some basics there. Make sure that everybody who is in the serial chain of the interview process understands their role. Try to avoid duplication of interview between different people so that everybody has a little bit of a different angle into the candidate. Try to make sure that you don't send people on an overly long candidate journey. Research has shown about anything after about 5 interviewees starts to diminish returns in terms of how many people have talked to the candidate. And use really good behavioral-based questions. If you know what behavioral-based interviewing is, that's great. If you don't, it's a good time to brush up, which is just about looking for concretes in their background that apply to the situation that they're going to be entering into. The last thing, which I think is a little bit different about hiring remote, is it can be, for people who haven't gotten used to this medium, this video-based medium, try to get them comfortable so that you just have a conversation and a conversational interview. One of the things that makes interviews hard and unsuccessful is when the interview is too stilted and not and overly formalized. That could be, you can be really prone to that in this venue because people aren't used to it. So they actually are even more artificial and stilted. But the more you can, like, so Phil, I love your Van Gogh. Yeah, is that Cezanne? What do you got there in the background?
This is Van Gogh.
It's Van Gogh.
But Mark Cezanne is my favorite artist.
All right.
Matisse, yeah. And by the way, people always ask me about this. As long as you have a computer with enough processing power, you can do the virtual screen on Zoom. If
Absolutely.
you don't, you need to get a green screen, and I can talk about that later if people are interested. But you know, some of you won't have home offices that are well set up, and you're going to need, I mean, Brent, that's actually a piece of art behind Brent.
Yes,
that's
no, Brent, I can attest to that as well.
Which is awesome. And you've got a fine spot, and Charlie has a fine spot behind her. But I also like to have art because I like that it brings a little warmth.
Exactly. So that's the reason why I called it out is just ultimately the more conversational and natural we can be in this environment, the better off we are both assessing candidates and then onboarding people. And like I got my equipment, everybody else has their equipment. Now on onboarding, I think that is a very specific challenge when it comes to remote.
Let me pause there because I want to see if we can come back to that, Mark. And I know that you might not be able to stay through Q&A, but I know there's a lot of eagerness to get to questions of like, suddenly we're now working from home and the basic stuff. And that you guys learned an enormous amount about how to create the right context for Zoom meetings to be effective for your regular meetings as you run your company. So keep going, Brent, and Mark, why don't you just stay with us as long as you can.
Great.
Go ahead.
All right. Okay. So I will come back to, we can come back to things like onboarding, which it's like right now, if you have to just do it a little bit less time, just know that it's going to be harder for the people you're interviewing to evaluate them as well as you normally do, and you're not going to get the social signals as well. And two is onboarding them is a different ballgame. And so for those small number of people over the next couple of months or big number of people, pay attention to it. You'll have to do it differently. If you can, I'd even recommend doing an in-person final interview, even if we're in a fully remote world. The signals you get there are just really hard to get in a fully distributed environment. Anyway, it's harder to build relationships. So again, if you have relationships, that's great. Sustaining existing relationships, if you go from online to offline, is actually quite easy, I find. But if there's folks that haven't met each other or only meet each other in a fully distributed environment, it's actually harder to build those relationships. So just know that whatever your incoming social dynamics are into this temporary remote world looks like, you'll have to compensate for the folks who've never met each other before in this environment. They're just going to trust each other less. They're going to have more questions.
That strikes me as really helpful. Like all of a sudden our company's virtual and some of our team hasn't really worked with each other before. Did you learn anything, Brent, about how to build relationships when people haven't met or don't know each other at least very well?
I have a whole bunch of those I'm going to get to.
Okay. I know.
You go.
Okay.
But in general, like there are ways of making this medium more human. So for example, we all know how important body language is. We all know how important your expression is. You as leaders are going to have to sort of up your game of being expressive and communicative and using hands. Like whatever you normally do, put on like the actor cap in you and be even more expressive because so much gets lost through this medium. I also think help people know what their environments are. It can feel so transactional building relationships in like these boxes. So take your camera and like walk people around your room and say, here's where I am. I'm on the top of my home. That's 94th Street and 95th Street on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. My kids are downstairs. In your team meetings, like take your laptop and like show people the house. That kind of stuff, I would call it cribs, because there used to be this TV show on MTV called Cribs. Can actually build relationships in this like context of, oh, I know what world you're in, as opposed to you're in the ethereal space.
Brent, what did you do with someone, if someone felt, I don't know, like they didn't have a nice enough house that they wanted to do that? Did that ever come up, or?
It never came up. And people had all kinds of different things. We had people who lived in studio apartments. It's because it's not about showing off. It's about just having shared awareness of like, oh, your partner or your pet is in the same room with you. I'm going to be more sensitive to that. I know what your daily life is like.
Right.
And so there's an even more basic thing here, which is you've got to have norms, and you should institute norms. I'll list them all out later.
Yeah.
You've got to institute norms. Camera always has to be on. If you didn't live in this world before, you might have been, sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off. Camera always has to be on, because otherwise, like, people feel like they're not being listened to. People disengage more naturally if they feel like they're not accountable. You want people to stay connecting and working hard and doing what they need to be doing. They have to have camera on. And in fact, there's another norm that I'd recommend, which is decide what if people can multitask in meetings. Guaranteed, people, as soon as they get into this environment, are going to start slacking and doing email when they're in a meeting if they're not the primary person. Unless you say, we have a social contract not to Slack or email in the middle of meetings, because you wouldn't do that in a regular meeting. If you have a norm in team meetings that you don't use devices, make that the same here, because people will naturally do it. And what you'll see is people start, their eyes glaze, their like eyes move left to right on the screen. People learn how to fake paying attention while they're reading. So you have to compensate for that. So
and Brent, can I add one little thing? So we had a group call last week with our HR council, and one of the large companies there, which has a huge customer service operation, that had to suddenly go all remote in China during this crisis. One of the things they advised for like customer support people was to acknowledge if like a dog barked or the kid was crying, to like literally say, hey, I'm working from home. We're in the middle of this crisis, but I'm fully focused on you, which I thought was a really, really lovely idea. Anyway, yeah.
And Mark was just making a point in a chat he sent here, is that it might be okay to multitask in meetings, just have a social contract on what it is. You want people to follow the same rules. And it's very easy to not set rules, and then it results in more chaos.
I hate multitasking in meetings, but okay, I guess some people think it's all right. But you're right, make the decision. Yeah.
And I'd say this third major bucket of problems around people is that they're just missing context. So like you're not walking in the halls, you're not having a water cooler, but it's not even the water cooler. It's not even a cafe or an elevator. Like there's no things become more transactional. The day turns into 10 back-to-back meetings with no processing time between those meetings to like digest what happened at the end of last meeting and to prepare for the next meeting. It's mentally exhausting, but also you're just not picking up what's going on. That is very, very tricky. Like for example, say today you're in product management and you need to go talk to a partner in marketing. You will walk into the marketing area, you will see other marketing people, you'll see names and faces. That disappears in this environment. You only spend time with the people that you have a specific need to have a meeting with. So all those other folks that you don't have an intentional need to meet, you will never see. You will never build a relationship with them. And that's, I know you're not going to be, most of you are not going to live in this permanently, but just recognize your folks are going to be picking up many fewer signals about what's going on in the company, and they'll feel more siloed. So I encourage things like more frequent team check-ins with your team. Skip levels. What I found is that in person, you can sort of directly touch the direct reports of your leadership more regularly and walk the halls and hear what's going on. You don't get that through Slack. You will be more distanced. Your meetings with your more junior folks are going to feel higher stakes for them because it's limited time and more transactional. And so you actually, if you didn't do skip levels before, you got to do them now as a way to have like just more unstructured time with people other than your inner circle of folks you meet with all the time.
That's really
Um,
cool. Did you have any like random or lottery way to connect people? Like
well,
to,
we did try. There's like a donut app in Slack that we tried. I don't know how well it worked, to be honest.
okay.
And so we could sometimes do department meet and greets where like for half an hour, all the PMs of this division would meet all the product marketers of this division, and that could actually be really nice.
Yeah.
But just your folks are going to be having less context, so you want to help them feel like they belong in the organization and have high feelings of engagement and connection. You have to more actively get involved in setting these things up for them. And so
And can I
again,
ask you, and this will come up in the Q&A, but like everything you're saying is so helpful, and I'm thinking it's probably it's even true another, and more true now for these companies who are in the middle of because not only are people suddenly working from home, but their kids are now with them possibly, their schools have been closed. And then there's just the emotional experience of like every day it feels like the world changed in a way we didn't expect,
yeah.
And suddenly people are more isolated potentially or working in tough environments. And I wonder if you ever, did you end up, the other thing that one of these major companies did is they provided psychologists to the suddenly working from home people. And I don't know if did you guys ever do anything like that or find a need for more therapy or counseling or coaching support?
I'll leave this one to Mark about our employee assistance program.
Yeah.
No, I mean, with an all remote company, you typically select on entry for people who are comfortable and choose it. I think that the hard part now for all of us is a lot of people are doing it for the first time, not having chosen it. So
Yeah.
Phil, it's a great question on how we support it. The company I'm at, Lambda School, has remote, but also office employees, and we're going through transition ourselves. So it's a really good point.
Yeah.
Probably we will see some of that, and it likely is going to be important.
If you end up,
and Phil, actually, just to underscore this point, we found when we hired people that most people would actually do fine in a remote environment, but some people couldn't handle it. Like it's just their personal needs could not be met in a fully distributed environment.
Yeah.
If you're in this for 2 months, a small percentage of your employees are going to be those type of people who actually really flail in this environment. And so, you'll start getting performance problems from people that wouldn't happen in their regular context. And so you'll either need to support them more or cut them a little more slack, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really helpful. And I'm sure we'll come back to that, but thank you. It's really great.
All right, let me continue. This is probably the part that needs the most help from you as leaders, is in setting up the process for how your organization works. Because you've basically now just totally blown up their process in a bunch of the things that they do, because how they get information, how they interact with people, how their personal needs are met. So first off, communications is going to be challenged for a lot of reasons, as you know. You don't no longer control space. Space is a way of sort of controlling messaging, like setting a mission on the wall and sort of having people come to a room for all hands and driving
really
things.
helpful.
So the culture, you have much less control over culture. Body language, as we talked about, is much harder to share remotely, and so context gets lost. There's just too much messaging. Slack is both very important, but it's also very easy to miss things. And the consequence for missing a message is much lower in Slack. So it just a lot gets missed versus if you're in person and you tell people something, they're going to hear it. You just cannot count on Slack as being guaranteed that people hear it when you want them to hear it. So
and Brent, I'll just add that one of the complaints I've been hearing from people is that with the COVID virus, suddenly they're like being inundated by messages from their company and every organization they've ever been affiliated with, museums and schools and so on, right? So it's probably that plus, right? Again,
so even again, not only are they in an isolating environment, they're feeling more isolated because of the situation. Not only are they in a more messaging challenged environment, they're being inundated by messages. So you need to help them.
Yeah.
So communicating clearly, you have to just bring your A game of best practices on how to communicate and make sure that it's regular, consistent, and clear. Help people set up their environments if you want to sort of control the space and culture, you can influence that. You could literally like mail people things to make them feel like they have a shared space and shared messaging. I'll get into actual home setup in just a minute here.
Yeah.
But like, if you want to, if you have an active people department, you can actually help people set up their environments to share a culture. So for example, this is a great time for swag. Like send everyone like their t-shirts and have them wear their t-shirts on the call, like makes them feel
Brilliant.
more connected.
Oh, that's such a simple idea. I love that. Of course.
You know, given that body language is harder to read, recognizes communication gap, and like overemphasize, as we talked about. I remember the first all hands I gave at InVision, I got feedback from my CEO. It's like, Brent, you were a little stiff, just like go overboard with speaking into the camera slowly, intentionally. And I just sort of became my new behavior of how to communicate in this environment. And then for too much messaging and messaging overload, you have to be intentional. This is the official channel that you're accountable for reading this. We're going to pin the most important things. Like there's just going to be so many channels for messaging. You have to tell people what's important. I also think that to separate signal from noise with messaging, a really powerful tool you have is recording videos. One of the things we do in product management, for example, is instead of just like, here's a note, an article about a product that gets released, we actually make video demos explaining products. When we have strategy sessions that we would have been like an all hands presenting out to the company, we actually now have people record videos like, here's our learning over the last quarter from A, B, and C. It's important that you know about it. We have people make concise videos and share those videos that are then
any best practices there, Brent, in length, you know, time, like don't go more than 5 minutes, or make sure you do X or Y? Or...
Yes, videos that are under, frankly, 3 minutes are most consumable. If it's like 10 minutes, people will say, oh, I'll just get to it later. And then it becomes a backlog. 5 minutes or less, frankly, 3 to 4 minutes, people are like, oh, I can actually consume this in a much more reasonable
3 minutes is the sweet spot, really, is what you learned.
That's what we found. Okay. So that's a new behavior. There's many different tools out there for recording video. So like, that's an
including, by the way, Zoom, which is how I'll sometimes record videos. I'll just do my own little thing and hit record. Bam.
Zoom, QuickTime. People don't need high production value. They just need to see humans in emotion.
And by the way, QuickTime's great for recording your desktop, and if you're demoing software use. So nice. Anyway, keep going.
We talked already about focusing in meetings because it's too easy to multitask, and so you got to have rules, a social contract explicitly about this. This is one a lot of people ask questions about. What if my home environment stinks? Your physical environment may be more distracting. Sorry, typo there. Physical environment, remote and physical environment may be more distracting than an office. You might have a pet at home. You might be sharing a space with kids who are also from home. Gosh, this is a really tough one. And so this is, you'll have to work with people almost one-on-one on this. But like best practices are noise canceling, headphones, big screen and monitor, comfortable chair. At InVision, we gave people a $500 budget to build out their office. I encourage them to use that full $500 on a refurbished Aeron chair because you need a comfortable chair to sit in all day. I have a $500 refurbished Aeron chair here, and like I can sit in it all day. First day I sat in a chair I had in the house and my back hurt. You know, those are some of the materials that you have, but also, you know, if they're sharing space with other people, you know, they're going to need flow time. They're going to need quiet. And so they should work with other people in their home to figure out like who can get dedicated space. Is there another space they can go to, a nearby coffee shop that's quiet, or another space in the building where they can get quiet? You'll have to help people based on their contexts. But folks need to be intentional about this because a distracted employee at home is going to be much less productive and engaged than a well set up employee at home.
Yeah.
This is a big one. A lot of folks, especially the 50% of people out there who are more interactive problem solvers or extroverted live problem solvers, are used to that whiteboard feeling of like getting together in a room. And something like 50% of people like to solve problems by themselves and come back. 50% like to do it live with others. It's harder to get that feeling in a distributed environment. At InVision, we built a tool for ourselves to solve this called Freehand that I absolutely love. It's basically multiple cursors on an infinitely zoomable white screen that you can type and have shapes on. There's multiple tools for this, including Miro, which used to be real-time board, Mural. There are a number of tools out there like this. So just find one that works for you, but it is a behavior change to move to this. Once you do it, it's really powerful. If you think about all those times like you've written on a whiteboard, I'm pointing to my whiteboard, and then you take a photo of it and you share it with people. Once you actually start to move to a digital whiteboard, it's actually a behavior change that it will sustain, and it will become a new behavior for you. And so I think that's a very positive byproduct of this.
Yeah.
You'll have to demo this, practice this, beta this before you roll it out. But it actually can be a really helpful collaboration tool. An area where you would have gone backwards by not being in person is actually now something that you can go forwards in and get even better at. Calendars, just noting the first time people go to an all-day, back-to-back, fully distributed schedule, it's so taxing. You literally end a meeting, start another meeting, brain has to switch. You don't get to walk out of the room with other people and digest it, drop something off at your desk, pick up coffee and go to the next one. You're expected generally to show up. By the way, we'll send out the slides afterwards. Leg off C1.
Thank you for seeing that, Brent. Yeah.
So just recognizing that this, one is it's a change that will feel really weird in the first week and then people get used to it. However, you can help. You can help by making sure, for example, in whatever rules you like, end meetings 10 minutes early, follow meeting best practice so that at the end of the meeting, like what are the direct next steps and who's accountable. Ensuring people say like, put half an hour breaks in your day for lunch, coffee, moving around, things that you wouldn't normally do in the office. Make sure that people do them here, because otherwise people will just sit down and sit in their chair for 10 hours and not move. And their ability to absorb what's going on is much worse. Their health actually gets worse. So you need to help people figure out how to be more productive in this.
And in a moment where we're worried about health, that can't even, really double. We're a fully remote team, obviously, here at Collaborative Gain, and that's so important what you're saying, Brent.
I mean, just if you have a pedometer, many people use pedometers, try going from an in-person company to a work from home company with a pedometer. You will go from 6,000 natural steps of just your daily life to 300 or 500.
Right.
Happens, and so you have to make behavior modifications. So like encourage your people to like go out for a jog outside if it's safe, etc. Find some time. So lots of different ways that you can do that we just talked through. Last thing, small one. If you're developing your people, you want to help your people get better. Getting feedback in any form is much harder. Feedback of, hey, I give an all hands presentation and I want to know how people are responding to that. Feedback in, you're helping groom someone to become better. It's much harder to read the crowd and get feedback from people because of the body language thing. And so if feedback is an important part of how you work in your process, you need to be intentional about supporting that.
And by the way, this is something I work on really hard when we do these talks. I'm not giving the talk, but my job is to try to give you feedback, nonverbal, really present to support you, but also the whole group. I think it's important. Yeah.
And Mark, great point. You could swap commute time for movement breaks in the day.
Yes, right. That's right. Think of commute time as your break time. Love that.
All right. So what are the top 5 things to do tomorrow if you just move from an office environment to a fully distributed environment? And these are I had to try to synthesize things in no particular order. Set rules and expectations. We talked a lot about this. Otherwise, you could have inconsistent bottoms-up chaos where every individual team does it differently, and then the machine just gets all this friction. So messaging channels, working hours. We are going to all be on from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. in your time zone. Like, be explicit about that. How you multitask in meetings, having your cameras on, scheduled catch-up time slots between you and your people and skip levels, making that time. Also, having good decision-making rules. If you don't already have that in your company, it gets worse in a distributed environment. So if you use RACES and BASES or SPADES or any of those types of tools, if you don't have it, then it takes longer to make decisions.
Yeah.
So that's something that you could do today for your people. Second, help your people get focused. If you were keeping things together by being in person and bringing them together, it's now more likely they're going to drift apart, as we talked about. So make sure your strategy is good, your goal setting process works well, cross-functional, you have machinery for that, and store it in a clear centralized place. If you had 1,000 different wiki tools and solutions out there, have one good one that is like the source of truth for the company, because people are going to be looking for it. And you want them using the same information of where we're going and what's important, what goals are, instead of different ones. So you can make those rules today, or realize you have challenges today on your direction or what's important, and fix it. And then as you get into your next goal planning, adjust. Recognize the human toll. If you don't do this, then you'll have many cultures and like little fiefdoms of people behaving differently, loving their little local cliques, but struggling to work with other parts of the organization. So departments meeting each other, sharing your offices, doing your skip levels, even having an org chart can be really helpful. Because otherwise it's so easy to dehumanize people in other departments if all you see are names and never even faces, let alone real life video.
Brent, was silliness a part of your culture, or playfulness, and were there things you did to make that happen over video or remotely?
Not as an institutionalized thing. Like, for example, I once heard Evernote had like something called Onesie Wednesdays, where like the company would wear onesies on Wednesdays. We didn't especially do something like that, but we encouraged people to be authentic to themselves, and we had employee resource groups to support people feeling they can bring their whole self to work.
Great.
But if it's part of your company culture, do it. Your new people are at risk, especially in this new environment. So, just note that they are at risk, that you need to give them extra love, extra onboarding support. You might want to pair them with a proactive buddy. Just checking in on them on Slack isn't going to work. You actually need like face-to-face, video-to-video time. And I think even worse risk for your organization are new managers. It's harder for you to coach and support and know what's going on with new managers. And they create much more collateral damage in your organization if they stink, if they are not following the rules, if they're not working out well. And so you want to figure that out early. You want to coach them even more. Encourage 360s on new managers after 30 days. It's a little rigorous compared to being in an in-person environment, but it can really catch problems and that you can fix, because again, these are folks who have multiplier impacts if they're not working out well.
Yeah.
And then lastly is, make it comfortable for people. Comfortable chair, big screen, noise canceling headphones, and quiet spaces. And that it's going to depend on people's situations, and give people a little bit of slack if they say, hey, I can't actually do it at this time because this is the time that the kids get home, and et cetera, et cetera. Be flexible with people so they can do their best work. There's no like blanket things to do here other than maybe the equipment, but like how they get that quiet and focus, you'll have to work with them.
Great.
So
this is great.
That's what I had for you. Again, we're going to send this out, and I'll also add in any things that come in from the questions.
Okay. All right. So let's start with questions. Fantastic. So Leanne Waldall, I'm going to promote you to panelist. Okay. Hey, Leanne. You just have to unmute. There you go.
And I can turn on my video.
So just say a few words about yourself, and then you have some great questions.
Yeah, well, first, Brent, I have worked with InVision before. I've been super impressed by being in an online meeting with 30 plus people who are attentive and present. I've only ever experienced that at one company I've worked at. So kudos to all of you.
Thank you. It's a social contract part.
Yeah. So I joined a new company, and some of my colleagues are on this call too. And now I joined this company about 6-7 weeks ago. And now we, of course, have a lot of people who need to work from home, and it's brand new for a lot of them. And, particularly in urban spaces where, like you mentioned, Brent, people live in houses that are meant for living, not for working. Right now, my daughter's high school shut down. She's home doing online learning for a month or more. As soon as my wife and I have to work from home, I'm like, okay, in this 800 square feet, how do we do this? So it's temporary, it's emergency. So I really appreciate all the things you brought up. But there are struggles with people who have nannies and who they didn't join a remote company, and on and on.
And this is why you're going to have to sort of work it out case by case. Like some people can afford childcare, some people can't. Some people have buildings that have shared spaces. Can you even use them or not? is the weather supportive for you to go to a nearby coffee shop where you can sit outside and feel safe?
I can sit on my patio. Yeah.
Oh, you have a patio.
Can't sit in coffee shops in San Francisco right now because of the virus fear. Yeah. The other thing is, I'm interested in how InVision did this at the beginning, or other companies did at the beginning, because that's where a lot of us are with companies that are just starting to do this. How do you encourage and motivate that social contract and turning the video on? Or if Zoom is failing, which it did yesterday, have everybody turn their video off so you're all on the same sort of like playing field.
Oh my goodness. So we lived on Zoom. I spent 10 hours a day on Zoom. If Zoom didn't work, our backup was Google Meet or slash Google Hangouts. And if that didn't work, we would do one-on-one with FaceTime.
Okay.
And it was rare, frankly, that there's like a full Zoom crap out, but in this new environment, that's possible. So we had those backups, we used them. Occasionally we just call each other on the phone. We actually got so used to using Zoom that like a nice thing, if you can do it, is take a call and go for a walk outside in the fresh air while you're taking a call as a way of getting mobility. But if you're so used to seeing each other's faces, that actually broke the social contract. So if there are certain types of meetings where you don't need to have your face, like for example, maybe there's an all hands and only 3 people are going to be presenting, that can be a good one to take while you're walking. But the space one, it's a difficult problem to solve. If 3 people are in a 1-bedroom place and there's not another place in the building and there's no other place around, then all you can do, like the best you can do is try to take turns in meetings where you have to be speaking a lot.
And I'll share a couple of ideas. So one reporter in Hong Kong who had 2 small children and a husband in a small apartment, and the kids' schools were closed and she had to work from home. It was like suddenly like, this is impossible, right? So what she first did is a common room in the building, but then the common room got shut down as part of the COVID virus protocols. So she ended up finding a would other people be able to do that? Like there's just, you have to get creative. So yeah. She found that there was an employee who couldn't travel back to Hong Kong, who let her go to his apartment during the day and work from there, because he was stuck somewhere else and couldn't travel back, so it was just like, like this is the kind of thing we're going to have to, and I'm sure you're already working through as managers, right? How do we do that? Charlie, do you want to just say a few words about your situation?
I mean, sure. I think it's probably a common situation, just like you're talking about, Lan, but my fiance got sent home and is working from home indefinitely. And obviously I'm permanently remote. So I have my desk set up. I've got a whole system and I'm used to it and it's great and working for me. And now he's here all the time in my background and he's taking calls and trying to be present for his people and his team. And he's a new manager. And so trying to figure out how to manage those people and be supportive and feel supported at the same time, it's difficult. So spatial awareness is interesting. So we'll use our community space. Luckily we have it until they tell us we can't any longer.
Yeah, Phil, and Charlie, I like your idea of using other people's spaces. I actually live in a community of 10 houses where half the people are tech workers and working from home, and they live alone. You just inspired me to think of like, maybe I could ask them if I could use one of their rooms since there isn't one in my house.
Yeah, maybe this is a business idea for Breather. Maybe Breather can pivot. And
But some quirky things real quick. At InVision, we had people use closets as their offices during the day. A lot of people actually would work out of a bedroom and when someone else was in the common room. And sometimes people got dividers if they used noise canceling headsets and like AirPods during the day. They got even a big whiteboard. They just use it as a divider, and their significant other who was in the same room as them, they would both be able to be present and active in the same room and just not see each other. Yeah. It depends on your setup, but we saw lots and lots of creative things. It was important that the company had a culture that like wasn't judgy. Some people might be like, well, is it weird that people see my bedroom? Like that's beyond my social norms. We got over it here. So the question, what's right for your company?
Yeah. All right, yeah. Leanne, why don't you hang out with us? I want to bring in a couple more people.
Okay. I would love to hear more about motivating.
Motivating. Yes.
You do top-down social contract or like motivate, and I'll step out.
Okay. Brent, yeah. Do you want to speak to that?
Gosh, I don't know how much more I have to add to like this wonderful group of leaders. We all have our own different tools of motivating.
Yeah.
Sometimes, in an environment, we need top-down rules. How you communicate those rules and how, we all have this Jedi mind trick, and we know what we want it to be. Instead of just telling people what it is, we like bring in people, make them feel heard, what their opinions are, and then we tell them more or less what we wanted to do anyway, with a little bit of shaping. That's a very common trick on strategy and mission, et cetera, et cetera.
I have one quick tip I'll just throw out, and then I'll bring in Ann Yager. Like, if you want to find out how an employee is doing, especially in a remote environment, don't just ask them how are you, because that question doesn't elicit anything. Think about, like, for me, I was thinking about you, Charlie, and I thought that your fiance might come home, so I asked you specifically, hey, what's happening with that, and is he home, and how are you guys doing? Like, so taking it that extra step where you can just in this moment, I think is particularly helpful. Hey, I know you have a child who'd been sick, or you had a child who had gone through some stuff. How's that going? What's that like for you? Yeah.
100%. And when we talk about some top-down policies just to bring order to the chaos, you do need the bottoms-up relationship stuff really matters. So like, if you don't know your employees' partners or and family kids' names, like learn them now, write them down, and like ask people how they're doing, because they're going to be in the background anyway, and it's going to be more top of mind for them. They're going to be more anxious. But other ways of motivating, clear goals you need for motivating, all the usual tricks. We have a really important mission. There's a lot that you can learn in this to demonstrate mastery. And what kind of autonomy are they going to get in this type of environment? The three parts of that book, Drive, Autonomy, Mastery, and Purpose, all can be rolled up into adapting to this environment.
All right, so Ann Yager, I'm going to bring you in now, promoting you to panelist. Let's see, that should work, I hope. Funny, it didn't seem to do anything. Maybe oh, there she is. Okay. Ann, can you hear us? So, yeah, you have to unmute your mic. This is part of this too, right, Brent? As people get used to Zoom, and like you're just very proficient in it.
Yeah.
And are you there?
Yep. Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Trying to start my video. I'm getting internet is unstable. So
okay.
We'll see what happens.
That's also something you get used to. It's just like bearing with the fact that people stop in weird poses and then they're just stuck like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead and ask your questions, Ann.
All right.
Hear you.
Really addressed a lot of them. I'm at CarMax. We're here I am. So we're a large retail organization. Our corporate office is now working from home. Our store associates are not, but we don't have many remote employees at all. So we're really not used to this at all. You've really touched on a lot of my questions, and I want to thank you and Mark both for this is so insightful and helpful and so well timed. And thank you, Phil, for organizing it. I think what my folks are hungering for is like, what are the best tools? Like, what's your tool set that you're using? We've talked about Zoom. That's great to know. But just like, what do they, if they're running, I lead product teams. And so if they're running just a normal sprint, what do they use for refinement meetings? What do they use for retros? What do they use for all these things? Do they just do Zoom? They were certainly missing whiteboard tools, things like that. So if there are tools that keep people, the other question is, how do they just try to retain some of the benefits they got from being a co-located, cross-functional, fast-moving, nimble team when they're not co-located anymore?
With the right tool set, the people who work together every day actually will retain that connectivity, especially if they have the relationships coming from offline. Those are the folks we actually found.
Hey, Brent, this is a great question. I just want to, we've got 3 minutes left, and what I'd like to ask, can you go past 1 o'clock, Brent?
I have to leave at 1 o'clock, apologies.
Okay, all right, so go ahead.
That's it. So just a good thing for us all to know.
For anyone who wants to stay, we can stay and continue to have a conversation because there's others here who can contribute. But go ahead, Brent. Sorry.
For anyone who, so it's good to know that the people that you already have good relationships with, your first teams, your direct reports, actually stay pretty strong moving from offline to online. You just need to have good, like the appropriate tooling. So, and at InVision, we used Zoom. We tested all the video tools. Zoom was the best for us. We used Slack. There's lots of alternatives there, and we use Gmail. Those are the 3 tools we use most of the time for most of the people. For a wiki, we used Confluence. It was fine, good enough. I'm sure there's many other tools that are as good as that for a wiki. Yeah, those are kind of the 4 main things that one needed login to. There are specialty tools. There's a specialty SaaS tool for retros called Retroem or something like that. Did it work that much better than us doing it through like a shared screen of a Google Doc, Word doc? I don't know. We did have our digital whiteboard product because we all use InVision a lot. I really encourage you to use one that works for you, because we were InVision, we used our own stuff, but find one that works for you. That is the missing piece from going from offline to online for collaboration. So you really do need something like that.
All right, and then in the final minute here, I'm wondering if we can just bang a couple of things. Did you say like it was okay for folks to organize their time as they wish, like take a yoga class during the day, go surfing for an hour, take an hour walk, take a lunch break with a friend? Like how did that work?
We had social expectations. Like we said, like you are available from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern, wherever you are for this company, but you can take like a half an hour or an hour breaks through the day and schedule them so people don't schedule over them.
Okay.
And so
Great.
People had that. And if you need more flexibility, take it. And generally that worked pretty well.
And
people did do that. They did take yoga classes and walk their dog or what have you.
You've talked through the momentum issue, and I think, you know, the moralization issue. One of the questions that Amy had were resources to provide employees on working from home effectively. Did you guys create any guides or documents?
We did. We did come up with an onboarding document. There's a book called, I think, Remote Work that Jason Fried wrote.
Fried, yeah.
We suggested everyone read, and it covers all these core concepts.
Jason Fried's Remote Work. We'll send a link out to that later.
Great. I have to drop. I know many of you do too. Thank you all. Good luck. Be safe out there. Help each other.
And thank you. I'm going to stay on for a few minutes for anyone who wants to continue the conversation, which may not be any of you, but just in case that's the case. Brent, again, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for asking questions. Okay.
Cheers.